Welcome to Cultura Crossing, your digital bridge between faith and culture. Here, navigating life with Christ meets the challenges and diversity of the modern world.
I'm your host, Iris Leon, and today we are going to be talking about a topic that maybe you really haven't heard of, but maybe you have. I don't know, because I really haven't heard anybody talk about toxic grandparents. That's right. Today is not about your mom and your dad. Today is about your grandparents. And the reason why I'm talking about this topic is because a few days ago, had a memory. One of the toughest things to do when we get ready to confess, or let's say confront the things we've been involved in or brought under, it's hard when it's your own family and you have to kind of like expose the natures of things that could have caused a lot of your personality to become corrupt, not really formed in the right way or in a healthy way. This particular memory was brought to mind when I began to, let's just recap for a minute. When God began to do an inner work, an inner healing and deliverance, he began a while back, years ago. Obviously, when we come to Christ, we start the process of a sanctification that happens with our soul. And our soul is where our mind, will, and emotions are sitting. And a few years back, the Lord began to reveal memories. And there was one memory where I remember being a child. And he took me back to this place and he was like, "What do you see?" And I tell him, I said, "I see a child in a room with people, what we consider speaking loud, but it would be considered toxic. The loud approach, they were trying to get communication across and no one was listening." It was right here in this memory that God began to say, "I'm going to begin to remove those toxic seeds out of your personality, out of your life." And it was then that I realized that I was brought up in a toxic environment with a toxic family. And now I got to say this, it's no one to blame. We don't have anyone to blame. These traits are handed down from generation to generation. We are given the baton from the next generation before us, and however way they handled it is the way they will bring it down. I can't say that, oh, my family knew that wasn't unhealthy. To them, this was normal. This was their normal life. This is the way they interacted. This is all they knew. If they knew now, like certain things that, okay, the way you handled this should have never happened. The way you did these things, that should have never, happened. But, I honestly don't know how that would, it's that moment of knowing that you went all your life believing that this thing was the way to do it. And you find out that it wasn't at the age of, 50, 60, it kind of disturbs a lot. When I came into this memory, God began to reveal, like, this was the moment that this voice in your life was beginning to kill, destroy certain things in your life that should have blossomed, should have grew. He began to reveal in this moment there was a seed killer. They began to kill dreams, and it began to kill my emotions, and it began to kill relationships in my life. I want to talk about that today. I want to talk about the boundaries that we need to set with our family if they're toxic. We need to safeguard our children from that. We need to be able to allow the grandparents to kind of build a relationship, but around this boundary line that we're creating. That is what we're getting ready to discuss. One of the things I want to address right now, and I'm just going to pick 3 common traits that you're going to find in a toxic environment with grandparents. And that's number 1, it's the ability to teach kids to be ashamed of their dreams. That was number 1 seed killer for me. When I think about all the dreams that I had as a young child, the visions that I had in me of knowing that I had this greatness that was inside of me, and it was longing to be freed. I can see in those moments of my timeline where they were crushed and why they were crushed. It had nothing really to do with me. It had everything to do with the one who had the ability to say yes and no in my life. And the main cause of a lot of dream killing for grandparents is their dreams were killed. Someone crushed their dreams. Someone put their dreams to shame. Toxic grandparent discourages grandchildren from pursuing their dreams, from triggering feelings of shame or inadequacy. And the negative reinforcement only leads to an alteration in our brainstem, in a system of our brain, and where self perception is operating, it begins to contribute to that area, a low self esteem that begins to release symptoms of depression later on in life. We don't know that we are, and I'm going to say we as if I was a grandparent, we could be the cause of a child's depression later on in life. We could be the cause of breaking down their self-esteem in ways that we think that we're maybe protecting them from the world, but in reality, we could easily be that seed killer. Proverbs 18:21, it reminds us, life and death are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruits. Power of death and life is in our tongue, and those who are eating from this power, it will be their fruit in their life. So I'm highlighting that there's an importance of speaking life-giving words to children, even adults who didn't get to have that opportunity of a childhood still deserves a life-giving moments in their life. We feed off of that because that's the power that encourages us and that empowers us to pursue the things that God has asked us to pursue. When I think about this moment, I think about the times that I've expressed my dreams at the table with my, grandparent, and often never got that life, the power of life, but yet the power of death. And it was always a discouragement to kind of not understanding why I couldn't pursue, becoming the world's greatest dancer, or pursue becoming the world's greatest clothing designer, or all these things that I imagined and tried to pursue. Why couldn't I be that person? And it was always like, well, where we come from or who we are, or, our culture, we just could never be that. That's just a dream. And so those moments began to close up the doors in my life to believe that it will always be impossible to be able to pursue those things in life. And that is what, draws a child to pursue other avenues that could be more dangerous than the one that they chose to pursue the first time. The second one I want to point out is the invalidating of emotions. And I'm going to say this, in a Latino house, you don't get to validate your emotion. You get to scream your emotion. You get to express your bitterness. You get to express your anger. But when it comes to healthy emotions, you don't get to do that. And a lot of times you're told to be quiet. And that's how we were raised. And I kind of did the same thing with my own kids. No, be quiet. Don't express. You can't talk. Don't tell me how you feel. This is just the way it is. And those were the common grounds for my children. They didn't get to express to me, the things that were on their heart when they were feeling and trying to process what they were feeling. Why am I feeling sad? Why am I feeling happy? What, those things. And that was the very nature that I was brought up in. Now, I always now encourage my children to express what's going on. But I do always emphasize this: do not express them in the moment where you cannot control your emotions. That is my number one thing. I was brought up in a household where you would say what you say because you're mad. You said what you said because you were sad. You said what you said. And remember, I just said in the first toxic trait was the fact that there is power in what we say and we cannot take it back. Regardless of what we are saying, oh, we're sorry for what we said. I'm sorry, but those words cannot be taken back. Now I'm hurt. Now I am wounded, and your sorry is not changing that. Your words, your voice is going to replay in my mind until I get healing. And that is not the way we are designed, is so that we could be on repeat with words that are choosing to actually be like an arrow penetrating into our soul. It literally is defined as a curse, a word curse. And so imagine, why would I want to speak to someone when I am angry and I have to first process why I'm angry, and then second process, am I a part of any of this? Did I trigger any of this to do this? Is there something in me that provoked this? And then if that is so, then figure out where I need to apologize. And I tell you, in the House of Latinos, you do not get that. It is not a thing. It is not a thing. And I had to learn that with Christ, that I don't want to talk with you until my anger subsides, because I don't want to say the wrong thing out of a place of hurt. I don't want to hurt you because I'm hurt. And that was something I learned in Christ, not even, learned that anywhere else. Like, it was something literally the Holy Spirit had to show me and say, hey, how about for the next time you want to have conversations that are going to, shake some things up in people, how about you take a moment and kind of process before you begin to come forth about the things you want to talk about? And confrontation, man, confrontation is a necessity. Confrontation is necessity, but healthy confrontation is the necessity. It's not a confrontation of me coming at you. And, that's not going to work. There's nothing that's going to be resolved at the table with that. Grandparents will invalidate the grandchild's emotions. When that happens, because even parents can do that, we disrupt the development of the emotional regulation that is happening in the brain, that should be happening in the brain. So automatically, we're already disruptors that are now disrupting the development of the emotional regulation that should be happening in the brain when emotions are springing up. And this invalidation begins to hinder the child's ability to process and express their feelings, which will lead to the difficulties in managing stress and anxiety. Yes. So a lot of the children today, we see that they are having a hard time expressing their feelings. They are having a hard time dealing with stress. They're having a hard time even trying to figure out how anxiety is. And the majority of the time is because somewhere in the development of their emotions, it was disrupted and it wasn't allowed to process the normal processing in the system of that brain. We could look at Ephesians chapter 4:29. It's simply stating what it is. It's encouraging us. Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouth, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. You might need to do a study on that if this is one of the things that you live through, or it's one of the things that you have to begin to figure out how to rewire your brain in the way that God is intended us to be wired, because let no corrupting talk come out of your mouth. I can tell you right now, there's a lot of corruption talk happening in the social media and in the surroundings we're living in now. It's almost like the majority of people don't even know how to be Christ-like. And so we're having a lot of corrupting talk against one another. And it's one thing to expose the false. It's another thing to just be randomly talking about people. And that's not a thing that we should be doing, honestly. It's a thing that God is saying, let this not be a thing out of your mouth, but only good to build up as fits the occasion. That means it's not going to be all the time, but there's going to be moments for you to be able to utilize this tool. For what? So that it might give grace to those who hear. That's another study we can all work on, is finding out what grace really means. Grace, it's not to give you permission to sin, but grace is the very anointing that gives you to actually change. It anoints you to change. So can we break cycles? Can we break patterns? Can we break behaviors? Absolutely. We've been given grace to do this. So the third thing that I want to bring out and identify, it's the ruining of family relationships. Toxic behaviors from the grandparents can activate brain stress response, leading to a heightened levels of cortisol and prolonged activation in a part of the brain. And this chronic stress can impair cognitive function, weakening our immune system, and increase the risk of mental health disorders such as depression and anxiety. Psalms 133:1 reminds us of the importance of the unity within the family, stating, "Behold, how good and pleasant it is when brothers dwell in unity." Now, I'm telling you all of this because we have to set some boundaries. We have to begin to set healthy boundaries and safeguard our children. When I say setting boundaries, we're looking at a clear layout that tells this person your behavior is harmful. And if it continues to be this way, I will have to not communicate. Not that anybody wants to be, in a place of discommunicating. It's to protect myself from this moment of what's happening. What you're doing is causing these things to happen in my life. It's going to cause these things to happen in my children's life. So we have to have an open communication. Encouraging to be open and honest in communication with the family can help address these issues and concerns that is related to these toxic behaviors. Listen, I'm laying these things out. And as I was studying it out, I'm like, even if they are not willing to be open in communication, you have to remember that you are doing your part, laying the foundation, and there's nothing I can do if they choose not to take the proper steps to respond in a healthy environment. We got to get to this place, especially when it comes to family, that we are not God and we are not the Holy Spirit, and we can only do what we are asked of to do. We can only live the way we're asked to live. If you are going to set these boundaries down and then allow toxic talk and thoughts and behavior come out of you, you can cancel this whole thing right now, because they're not going to respect your boundaries, because you too are part of the toxic trait. So we have to make a decision on where we're going to draw the line. If I am saying I don't like A, B, C, and Z, then why am I looking just like A, B, C, and Z? If we're going to implement this foundation in our life and begin to steward this, then we ourselves are expected to live in this manner and in order. We can't put this on people. I love this. We would love to put all these boundaries on people and set these rules and regulations, and then find ourselves we're just not practicing it, but we're preaching it. You can cancel that. That's a cancel culture. It's not going to work. It's like, enough is enough, and this is not what I am doing. You cannot set boundaries, and you yourself are out of order. Open up the table to that for a moment. I am seeing way too many people pointing the fingers, saying, all these things, and they themselves do not live this life. And so it takes work. It's going to take a few hiccups, but it's the requirements for you to keep going and keep implementing and keep living and keep restoring those areas of your life where you're going to become that healthy foundation. The next thing I want to say is that you need to seek out some support. Families dealing with toxic grandparents can benefit from seeking support from the therapists, counselors, and support groups, or, whatever they have. Maybe they have something in the church that you can get involved in and all that. So that's going to be important to begin to connect with people who are like-minded. You want to focus on positive influences. You want to see the essentials to focus on building positive relationships and surrounding your children with supportive, nurturing influences to counteract the negative effects that they were having. You want to establish a healthy boundary. Toxic behaviors from grandparents can disrupt family dynamics, negatively impacting our children's well-being. So it's crucial for us as parents and other family members to establish clear boundaries to protect both ourselves and our children. So this involves communicating boundaries with toxic grandparents, that we are going to begin to enforcing consequences when those boundaries are violated. So that is what I was stating before, that we need to know that we have to establish boundary violations. When they are violated, there's a consequence. The second thing is safeguarding children from the harm. It's important to foster positive relationships between children and their grandparents, and it's equally vital to safeguard children from emotional harm. This may involve monitoring interactions, intervening when necessary, and providing alternative sources of love and support to compensate for any emotional void. So we have to be able to be safeguarding by doing those things: monitoring, intervening, and providing alternatives where there is voids. Number 3, allowing the children to love their grandparents while guarding them. Children may naturally love grandparents even if their behavior is toxic. Believe it or not, that is a thing. You can love people even though they're toxic. We encourage children to maintain a loving attitude while also empowering them to recognize the healthy boundaries. So by modeling healthy relationships and boundaries, we can help children navigate these complex dynamics with the grace and resilience. Think about that. Think about the fact that they're going to want to love them, and they're not going to see the bad in them, because that's the way the innocence of children are. But we're going to have to begin to teach and train them up in the way of healthy life so that they may identify and say, okay, this is the right way to do it, and I'm seeing the wrong way, and then teach them how to process and move forward from that. It's a lot of work when you think about it, but it's possible by taking little steps in daily life. If I had my children, they were little, but they're no longer little. But if they were little, I would have taught them the difference of emotions. I would have taught them to process them correctly. And I would have taught them to show them how, okay, when this negative emotion comes, how are we going to address it? How are we going to counterattack it so that it doesn't create a void? The last thing is explaining a situation without being negative. Toughies. Why do I say that? Because a lot, or most often in relationships, people are explaining a person to someone, and they're always explaining it with the negative. How can we remove the negative and explain it where we're not taking away the value, the worth of the person, or making it where this child doesn't feel we're going to be disrespectful or discredit that this person is a human being, despite of all that's what's happening. So when we're discussing the situation with children, it is crucial to use age-appropriate language and focus on facts, then subjective judgment. Hello. I'm going to say it again. Focus on facts instead of subjecting judgments. That is number 1. We want to emphasize that it's okay to set the boundaries to protect oneself from hurtful behavior, while also reassuring the child that they are loved, valued, regardless of the circumstance. So when we are explaining a situation, stay away from the judgment. Don't be judgmental. Don't start pointing out all the things that you feel are inadequate for this person. Point out the facts. What are the facts? That the person that we are talking about is, hurt. The person that we are talking about has lived a rough life. The person we have talking about is having a hard time processing what love looks like. Those are facts. Those are facts. My judgment is not a fact. It is a judgment. So with today's topic, I hope that this will help you to integrate some of the strategies into our families and create a supportive environment for children so that they can navigate relationships with their toxic grandparents by having an open communication, by setting healthy boundaries and having positive role models in their life. I believe that the children can learn to navigate complex family dynamics while safeguarding their emotion and well-being. So I hope that this helps you today. I hope that this will help us become better people in our family. If you are a person who has had this type of struggle with toxic family and you're a believer and you just don't know what to do, there's some nuggets here that will begin to help you try to be the best person you can be in this life, in this walk, in this journey with Christ. I appreciate the listeners who have joined in today. Make sure you share so that other people become aware. Begin to follow. Go on culturapodcast.co and you will find a list of links there where you can hit the links, share, subscribe, and support. We look forward to being with you once again in our next upcoming discussion.